Part 1. Nepal in Context. The stage for 2025's upheaval. Nepal's geography and identity, wedged between two of the world's largest powers, India to the south and China to the north. Nepal occupies a mountainous strip of Asia whose rugged topography has shaped its culture, politics and economy for centuries. The Himalayas form a natural wall, but the country's history is not one of isolation. Trade, migration, and cultural exchange have long tied the Kathmandu Valley to the plains of northern India, Tibet, and beyond. Today's Nepal is a patchwork of high mountains, mid-hill settlements, and southern plains, with more than 125 ethnic groups and more than 120 languages, making it one of South Asia's most diverse societies per capita. The nation's population hovers around 30 million, roughly 40% are under 30, giving Nepal one of the youngest demographic profiles in Asia. This demographic dividend holds the potential for a dynamic workforce and fresh ideas, but also the danger of disillusionment if jobs and representation do not materialize. From monarchy to republic. To understand the turmoil of 2025, it helps to remember the political journey of the last 2 decades. Nepal was an absolute monarchy until the mid-20th century and retained a constitutional monarchy until 2008. A decade-long Maoist insurgency 1996 to 2006 destabilized the state and killed thousands. The 2006 People's Movement forced the king to cede power. In 2008, Nepal became a republic, abolishing the monarchy entirely. The promise of the republic was a new beginning, multi-party democracy, an inclusive constitution, and a federal system meant to devolve power to provinces. But this transformation proved messy. Successive governments fell frequently. Coalition politics produced instability. Old patronage networks reasserted themselves under new party labels. For many Nepalis, democracy has meant frequent elections but little improvement in daily life. The federal experiment. Nepal's 2015 constitution formalized a federal structure. 7 provinces with considerable autonomy and local governments with their own budgets. In theory, federalism would give marginalized regions, Madhesi Plains dwellers, Janajati groups in the hills, more say in national affairs. In practice, it created new layers of bureaucracy and new arenas for corruption. Provincial and local bodies often lack trained staff and clear lines of accountability. Citizens complain about services while politicians complain about lack of funds. Still, federalism remains a crucial experiment in holding a multi-ethnic society together. Institutions and the rule of law. Post-2008, Nepal built a suite of institutions meant to ensure democratic accountability: an election commission, anti-corruption bodies, a Supreme Court with the power of judicial review, and an independent media. These have acted as partial brakes on executive overreach and moved to block or heavily restrict major platforms. It didn't just cut off chatter, it disrupted livelihoods and a sense of connection. This helps explain why protests were so intense. Political actors before the crisis. As 2025 began, the political scene was dominated by familiar figures. The Nepal Communist Party, unified Marxist-Leninist, and the Nepali Congress remained the 2 largest parties, each with a record of alternating in government. KP Sharma Oli, a veteran of communist politics, was prime minister. His government had already faced criticism over handling of COVID-era economic recovery, alleged corruption in infrastructure deals, and sluggish job creation. Opposition parties were fragmented. Some tried to court youth with promises of reform but were widely seen as part of the same old establishment. Civil society, frustrated, began organizing independently of party structures, especially online. The social fabric under strain. Nepal's social contract was fraying. Caste discrimination persists despite legal prohibitions. Women face barriers to equal participation in politics and the workforce. Indigenous groups and Madhesi communities in the south often feel marginalized. Migrant remittances have raised living standards in some villages but also created social strains. Children growing up with one or both parents abroad, local inflation from remittance money, and rising aspirations outpacing local opportunities. Add to this a series of environmental challenges, landslides, floods, and the long-term threat of climate change to Himalayan glaciers. The state's capacity to respond to disasters is improving but still limited, and natural calamities often deepen frustration with the government, setting the stage for upheaval. By mid-2025, the ingredients for unrest were all present: a digitally connected, politically aware youth cohort, a stagnant economy and high unemployment among educated graduates, perceptions of entrenched corruption, a government willing to restrict digital freedoms. The social media ban lit the fuse. Within days of its announcement, thousands poured into the streets. Demonstrations that began as peaceful marches evolved into nationwide protests. Some turned violent as security forces attempted dispersal. Reports emerged of fatalities, injuries, and mass arrests. Why this matters. Understanding the backdrop to Nepal's current crisis clarifies why the protests are not just a reaction to a single policy but an expression of deeper demands: accountability, jobs, rights, and a say in the country's future. The appointment of 𝐶𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐀𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐀𝐈𝐿 as interim prime minister marks an attempt to restore legitimacy by placing a figure with judicial credibility at the helm. Whether this will succeed depends on how the interim government manages the coming months, especially the promised elections of March 2026. Part 2. The crisis unfolds: timeline and key events. Introduction to the timeline. While Nepal has seen protests before, the events of mid-2025 were unprecedented in scope, intensity, and coordination. The following timeline shows how a single decision, the government's surprise move to ban major social media platforms, triggered a cascade of unrest and ultimately toppled the administration. July 2025. Rumblings beneath the surface. Economic frustration peaks. Inflation climbed to a 5-year high, especially in fuel, cooking gas, and staple foods. University graduates continued to protest chronic underemployment. Digital economy grows. Over 400,000 Nepalis were estimated to earn part or full-time income from online platforms, including e-commerce, content creation, tutoring, and freelancing. For many, social media wasn't just entertainment, it was livelihood. Opposition parties retool. Sensing the public's discontent, opposition leaders began pushing for reforms and hinting at no-confidence motions against the Oli government. However, skepticism remained high because many opposition figures were former ministers themselves. August 2025, the ban is floated. Leaks from the Ministry of Communications. An internal memo surfaced suggesting the government was studying a temporary restriction of certain platforms to curb misinformation and sedition. The memo cited national security and social harmony. Civil society pushback. Journalists, rights groups, and digital rights lawyers warned that a ban would violate constitutional guarantees of free expression and freedom of association. The government doubles down. Prime Minister Oli, in a televised address, said Nepal needed to clean up its digital space to protect youth from harmful foreign influence. This rhetoric alarmed the urban middle class, who saw it as a step toward authoritarianism. September 1 to 7, 2025. The ban announced. Policy enacted overnight. ISPs were ordered to block Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter. VPNs were also targeted with deep packet inspection technology. Economic backlash immediate. Online shops lost their storefronts. Travel agencies couldn't reach foreign clients. Small businesses relying on digital marketing were effectively cut off. Hashtags as protest calls. Despite the ban, young Nepalis coordinated protests using encrypted messaging apps and offline networks. Flyers appeared on university campuses. Community radios broadcast protest times and meeting points. September 8 to 15, 2025. The first wave of protests. Mass rallies in Kathmandu. Tens of thousands marched from Ratna Park to Singha Durbar, the administrative complex. Protesters carried placards reading "Don't cut our voice" and "Digital rights are human rights." Security forces respond. Riot police used tear gas and water cannons. Reports emerged of live ammunition being fired in Biratnagar and Pokhara. Several demonstrators were killed, dozens injured. Political defection. A small bloc of ruling party MPs resigned in protest, weakening the government's majority. September 16 to 23, 2025. National strike and international attention. General strike called. Transportation unions, student groups, and civil servant associations joined. Streets emptied. Markets closed. Losses to the economy estimated at $50 million per day. Diaspora rallies abroad. Nepali communities in Delhi, London, and New York organized solidarity marches, putting the crisis on international media's radar. Human rights groups issue statements. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch condemned disproportionate use of force. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression urged Nepal to immediately lift restrictions. India and China's reactions. India expressed concern about stability but refrained from criticizing the ban. China offered support for Nepal's sovereign right to regulate cyberspace, underscoring the geopolitical tug-of-war. September 24 to 30, 2025. Collapse of the Oli government. Cabinet resignations. Key ministers quit, citing irreconcilable differences over the crackdown. Army signals neutrality. The Chief of Army Staff publicly stated the military would uphold the constitution and refused to deploy troops for crowd control beyond protecting critical infrastructure. This deprived the government of its ultimate enforcement tool. Oli's resignation. Under mounting pressure, Oli resigned on September 29, claiming he was forced out by a foreign-backed conspiracy. Formation of a Truth and Accountability Commission. Charged with investigating protest-related deaths and government abuse during the crackdown. October-November 2025. Stabilization efforts. Economic relief package. The interim government announced microgrants and low-interest loans to small businesses disrupted by the ban. Political realignment. Parties began preparing for the 2026 elections, with new youth-oriented coalitions emerging. International support. Donors pledged emergency funds to stabilize Nepal's currency and support electoral preparations. Key actors and their roles. Youth collectives. The backbone of the protests. decentralized, tech-savvy, and distrustful of established parties. Civil society networks, lawyers associations, journalists unions, women's groups and rights NGOs that documented abuses and amplified voices. Diaspora communities provided international visibility and funds to sustain strikes and legal aid for arrested activists. Security forces, initially aggressive but gradually pulled back as public sympathy shifted. Political establishment split between reformists willing to work with the interim government and hardliners hoping to return to power after elections. Underlying dynamics of the crisis. Digital dependence. By 2025, the internet had become Nepal's primary mode of communication, commerce, and mobilization. Blocking it was akin to cutting electricity. Generational shift. A youth bulge with global exposure demanded transparency and rights. Weak institutions. The inability of parliament, courts, and oversight bodies to prevent executive overreach allowed the crisis to escalate. Geopolitical ambiguity. Nepal's position between India and China complicated the international response. Economic vulnerability. Heavy reliance on remittances and tourism left little cushion when domestic unrest disrupted daily life. Looking ahead from the timeline, the events from June to November 2025 have left Nepal transformed. The interim government is a stopgap, not a permanent solution. Elections will test whether public anger can translate into a durable political movement or whether old elites will regain power. Either way, the crisis has permanently altered the relationship between state and society, especially on digital rights and youth activism.